What happens when a simple birthday dinner ends with my husband being served divorce papers at work? How did one seating change, a few secret texts, and my own circle's encouragement lead to my entire life unraveling? Was I really the villain, or just misunderstood? Looking back now, sitting in this empty apartment with court papers scattered across my coffee table, I keep replaying that night at the bistro. Maybe if I'd made different choices, maybe if I'd listened to the warning signs. But honestly, I still don't think I did anything that terrible. My name is Ivanthy Meo, and this is the story of how my perfect marriage fell apart over what I still believe was a massive overreaction. The downtown bistro buzzed with Friday night energy as our party of 8 settled around the large circular table. It was my 32nd birthday, and I'd been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. Simon, my husband of 8 years, had made reservations at my favorite restaurant. Our daughter Laya sat between Simon and his mother Helen, chattering about her second-grade art project. "Ivanthy, you look absolutely radiant tonight," Kellen Drake said as he approached our table, fashionably late as always. At 34, Kellen had this effortless charm that drew people in. His warm brown eyes crinkled when he smiled, and tonight he wore a navy blazer that highlighted his athletic build. "Kellen, I was worried you wouldn't make it," I said, standing to give him a hug. His embrace lingered just a moment longer than usual, his hand resting on the small of my back. Simon looked up from his menu, his jaw tightening slightly. "Hey, Kellen, we saved you a seat over there, next to my dad." I glanced at the seating arrangement. Simon had positioned himself to my right, with Kellen's assigned seat across the table between Martin, Simon's father, and my sister Lauren. But looking at the setup, I realized this would make conversation with Kellen nearly impossible with all the noise. "Actually," I said, touching Simon's shoulder, "would you mind switching with Kellen? I'd love to catch up with him properly, and you know how loud this place gets." Simon's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I'm fine where I am, Ivanthy." "Come on, it's my birthday," I said with a playful smile. "Just this once. You can talk to your parents from anywhere." The table went quiet for a moment. Helen's sharp blue eyes darted between Simon and me, her lips pursing in that way that meant she disapproved of something. Martin cleared his throat awkwardly. "Simon, don't be difficult," Lauren chimed in from across the table. "It's her special day." Simon's face flushed slightly, but he stood up without another word, gathering his napkin and water glass. "Fine, whatever makes you happy." Kellen slid into Simon's vacated chair with an easy grin. "Thanks, buddy. I promise to keep your wife entertained." As soon as Kellen settled beside me, I felt a familiar flutter of excitement. He had this way of making me feel seen, appreciated in a way that Simon sometimes forgot to do. While Simon buried himself in work emails and household responsibilities, Kellen always made time for real conversation. "So, how's the new job treating you?" Kellen asked, leaning closer so I could hear him over the restaurant noise. His cologne, something expensive and woodsy, filled the small space between us. "It's good, but you know how it is working as an administrative assistant. Same drama, different office," I replied, acutely aware of how his knee brushed against mine under the table. From across the table, Simon watched our interaction with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was that jealousy? Hurt? I pushed the thought away. He was probably just tired from his long week at the IT company. "Tell me about the drama," Kellen said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know I live for your office stories." I launched into a detailed account of my coworker Dina's latest workplace gossip, enjoying how Kellen hung on every word. He laughed at all the right moments, asked follow-up questions, and made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. "Ivanthy," Helen's voice cut through our conversation like a knife. "How's Laya's school year going?" I looked across the table at my mother-in-law, noting the forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's going well, Helen. She's really enjoying her art classes." "That's wonderful. Family time is so important at her age," Helen said, emphasizing the word family, while glancing meaningfully at how close Kellen and I were sitting. The waiter appeared to take our orders, and I felt Kellen's hand brush mine as we both reached for the wine list. The contact sent a small thrill through me, and I didn't pull away as quickly as I probably should have. "The salmon here is incredible," Kellen murmured, his breath warm against my ear, "though I'm sure whatever you choose will be perfect." Simon cleared his throat loudly from his new position between his parents. "Ivanthy usually gets the chicken parmesan. She's not very adventurous with food." "Maybe I'll try something new tonight," I said, bristling at Simon's comment. "The salmon does sound good." As the evening progressed, I found myself gravitating more and more toward Kellen's warmth and attention. He complimented my dress, asked about my dreams and aspirations, and made me feel like the vibrant, interesting woman I used to be before marriage and motherhood consumed my identity. When the dessert arrived, a beautiful chocolate cake with sparkler candles, Kellen's arm slipped around my shoulders as everyone sang happy birthday. I leaned into him, telling myself it was just friendly affection. "Make a wish, Mom," Laya called out, clapping her hands. I closed my eyes and wished for more moments like this, feeling appreciated and desired. When I opened them, Simon was staring at me with an expression that made my stomach twist uncomfortably. "Thank you all for such a wonderful evening," I said, standing to hug everyone goodbye. When I reached Kellen, his embrace was warm and lingering. "Happy birthday, beautiful," he whispered in my ear. "You deserve to be celebrated every day." The drive home was unusually quiet. Laya dozed in her car seat, while Simon focused intently on the road, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "That was a lovely dinner," I said, trying to break the tension. "Was it?" Simon's voice was flat, emotionless. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, Ivanthy. I'm just tired." But I could feel something had shifted. When we got home, Simon went through his usual routine of checking locks and turning off lights without his typical goodnight kiss. He settled onto the living room couch with a pillow and blanket. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. "Sleeping here tonight. I don't want to disturb you." It was the first time in our 8-year marriage that Simon had chosen to sleep anywhere but our bed. As I lay alone in our king-sized bed, I told myself he was just being moody. Men could be so sensitive about the smallest things. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and pancakes. Simon stood at the stove, still in yesterday's clothes, methodically flipping pancakes, while Laya sat at the kitchen table coloring. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound normal. "You didn't have to sleep on the couch. The bed was lonely without you." Simon didn't look up from the pan. "I slept fine." "Daddy made Mickey Mouse pancakes," Laya announced, holding up her syrup-covered fork. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Simon, can we talk about last night?" "What about it?" His tone remained carefully neutral. "You seemed upset about the seating arrangement. I thought you were being a bit dramatic." Now he did look at me, his brown eyes tired and disappointed. "Dramatic?" "It was just dinner, Simon. Kellen is our friend. Your friend, actually. You've known him longer than I have." "Right, our friend." Simon plated the last pancake and turned off the burner. "The friend who had his hands all over my wife at her birthday dinner." "That's ridiculous. He was being friendly. You're reading way too much into innocent gestures." Laya looked up from her coloring, sensing the tension in our voices. "Are you guys fighting?" "No, baby," I said quickly. "Daddy's just tired." "Why don't you go watch cartoons while we clean up breakfast?" After Laya skipped into the living room, Simon began loading the dishwasher with sharp, precise movements. "I'm not imagining things, Ivanthy. The way you two were whispering, laughing, touching each other, it was inappropriate." "You're being paranoid," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I'm allowed to have friends. I'm allowed to enjoy myself at my own birthday dinner." "Of course you are. But there are boundaries in marriage, and last night felt like you crossed them." I stared at him, genuinely bewildered. I crossed boundaries by talking to someone. by enjoying adult conversation for once, instead of discussing grocery lists and liar's homework. Simon's shoulders sagged. Is that really how you see our marriage? As boring grocery lists and homework? Sometimes, yes, I admitted. When was the last time you made me feel special? When did you last compliment my dress or ask about my dreams? I tell you you're beautiful all the time. No, you tell me I look nice when I ask if an outfit makes me look fat. That's different. Simon closed the dishwasher and leaned against the counter, studying my face. So this is about me not being attentive enough? That's why you needed Kellen's hands on you all evening? His hands weren't on me all evening. God, Simon, you're making it sound like we were making out at the table. Maybe not making out, but you were definitely flirting. I was being friendly. I slammed my coffee mug on the counter harder than necessary. I'm sorry if my personality threatens you, but I won't apologize for being social. From the living room came the sound of cartoons, punctuated by Liar's occasional giggles. The normalcy of it contrasted sharply with the tension crackling between Simon and me. Your personality doesn't threaten me, Ivanthy. Your behavior with other men does. Other men? What other men? Kellen is literally the only male friend I have. Exactly my point. You don't need male friends when you're married. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's the most archaic thing I've ever heard. What century are you living in? Simon rubbed his temples, looking older than his 35 years. I'm living in a century where my wife asks me to move so another man can sit next to her, then spends the entire evening acting like she's on a date with him. You're being ridiculous and controlling. I won't be isolated just because you're insecure. Insecure? Simon's voice cracked slightly. Ivanthy, I watched my wife light up for another man in ways she hasn't lit up for me in months. If that makes me insecure, then yes, I'm insecure. His words hit closer to home than I cared to admit, but I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of knowing that. Maybe if you put half the effort into our relationship that you put into your computer programs, I wouldn't need to seek interesting conversation elsewhere. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew they were cruel. Simon's face went pale and he nodded slowly. I see. So this is my fault. I didn't say that. You absolutely did say that. Simon pulled out his phone and started typing something. I'm going to take Laya to my parents' house for the afternoon. I think we both need some space. Simon, don't be dramatic, and don't drag Laya into this. I'm not dragging her into anything. I'm removing her from a tense situation so she doesn't have to watch her parents fight. 20 minutes later, I watched from the window as Simon buckled Laya into her car seat. She waved at me through the glass, and I forced a smile, waving back. The house felt eerily quiet without them. I tried to enjoy the peace, taking a long bath and catching up on my favorite TV shows. But as the hours passed, I found myself checking my phone obsessively. Around 3 o'clock, a text message lit up my screen. My heart skipped when I saw Kellen's name. Hope you had a wonderful birthday celebration last night. You looked absolutely stunning. Coffee this week? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you. Coffee sounds lovely. Tuesday afternoon? Perfect. Can't wait to hear more of your stories without interruption. I deleted the text thread immediately, though I wasn't sure why. There was nothing wrong with having coffee with a friend. Simon was being paranoid and controlling, and I refused to let his insecurity dictate my social life. When Simon and Laya returned that evening, the atmosphere remained strained. Simon was polite but distant, speaking to me only when necessary. At bedtime, he announced he'd be sleeping in his home office. This is getting ridiculous, Simon. How long are you planning to punish me for having a conversation? I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. From what? From watching my wife fall for another man, while convincing herself she's done nothing wrong. That night, as I lay alone in our bed again, I called my sister Lauren. He's being completely unreasonable, I told her, recounting the weekend's events. It was just dinner conversation. Men can be so possessive, Lauren agreed. You're allowed to have friends. If Simon can't handle that, it's his problem, not yours. Exactly. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. Don't let him control you, Ivanthy. You deserve to feel appreciated and valued. Lauren's validation felt good, confirming what I already believed, that Simon was overreacting and I was the victim of his unreasonable jealousy. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the image of Simon's hurt expression when he'd said I hadn't lit up for him in months. Was that really true? When had I stopped seeing my husband as someone worth lighting up for? I pushed the thought away. Marriage was supposed to evolve past the butterflies and excitement of new romance. What Simon was really upset about was that he'd gotten comfortable taking me for granted, and now he was threatened by someone who still made an effort. The next morning, I found a small notebook on the kitchen counter that Simon had left behind. Curious, I flipped it open and felt my blood run cold. Page after page contained detailed notes about my behavior, our conversations, and my interactions with others. Dates, times, direct quotes. It was all there, written in Simon's careful handwriting. March 15th. Ivanthy stayed late at work, said she was helping with inventory. Called office, they said inventory was completed the week before. March 22nd. Found Ivanthy texting someone, quickly put phone away when I entered room. Said it was her sister, but she'd just talked to Lauren an hour earlier. April 3rd. Ivanthy mentioned Kellen 3 times in casual conversation. Brought up his promotion, his new apartment, his workout routine. My hands shook as I read entry after entry. Simon had been documenting my behavior for weeks, building some kind of case against me. The violation felt enormous. My own husband was spying on me, treating me like a criminal. But underneath my outrage was a growing unease. Some of these incidents, viewed through Simon's lens, did look suspicious. Had I really been that obvious about my growing friendship with Kellen? I slammed the notebook shut and shoved it back where I'd found it. Simon was the one with the problem here, not me. If he had so little trust in his wife that he needed to take notes on my every move, then our marriage had bigger issues than a birthday dinner seating arrangement. Sunday lunch at Helen and Martin's house had been a monthly tradition since Simon and I got married. Their modest suburban home always smelled like pot roast and fresh bread, and normally I looked forward to these family gatherings. But today, walking up the familiar brick walkway with Simon and Laia, I felt like I was heading into enemy territory. Helen answered the door with her usual polite smile, but I caught the way her eyes lingered on me with newfound suspicion. "Ivanthy, dear, how are you feeling after your birthday celebration?" "Wonderful, thank you. It was a lovely evening." "I'm sure it was," Helen said, her tone suggesting otherwise. Martin emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. At 65, Simon's father had the same gentle demeanor that had attracted me to Simon in the first place. But today, even Martin seemed uncomfortable, avoiding direct eye contact as he hugged me hello. "Grandpa, look what I made in art class." Laia bounded into the living room, pulling a colorful painting from her backpack. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Martin said, his face lighting up as he examined Laia's artwork. "Tell me about all these colors." While Laia chatted about her painting, I noticed Helen pulling Simon aside in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but I caught fragments of their conversation. Not appropriate behavior for a married woman. "I know, Mom, but I don't know what to do." That man had his hands all over her. My cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. How dare Helen discuss my private life like I was some kind of wayward teenager? I marched into the kitchen, my chin raised defiantly. "If you have something to say about me, Helen, I'd prefer you say it to my face." Both Helen and Simon turned, startled by my sudden appearance. Helen recovered quickly, straightening to her full height. "All right, then. I think your behavior at dinner the other night was inappropriate and disrespectful to your husband." "My behavior?" I laughed, but it came out sharp and brittle. "I had dinner conversation with a family friend. Since when is that inappropriate?" "Since you asked your husband to move so you could cozy up to another man," Helen shot back, her polite facade cracking. I have eyes, Ivanthy. We all saw how you were carrying on. Carrying on? I was talking to someone at my own birthday dinner. I'm sorry if my social skills offend you, but I won't apologize for being friendly. Simon stepped between us, his hands raised peacefully. Mom, please. Ivanthy, let's not do this here. No, Simon, let her speak her mind, I said, my voice rising. I want to hear exactly what Helen thinks I did wrong. Helen's blue eyes flashed with anger. You want to know what you did wrong? You humiliated your husband in public. You flirted with another man in front of your daughter, your family, and your friends. You acted like a woman who's forgotten she's married. I acted like a woman who enjoyed having an actual conversation with someone who finds her interesting. Interesting? Helen's voice dripped with disdain. Is that what you call it when a man puts his hands all over you? He didn't have his hands all over me. God, you people are acting like we were having sex on the table. Ivanthy! Simon's voice cracked like a whip. That's enough. From the living room, I heard Laya's voice calling for her daddy, probably confused by the raised voices. Martin appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking deeply uncomfortable. Maybe we should all take a breath, Martin suggested quietly. No, I want this settled, Helen said, crossing her arms. Ivanthy, I've watched my son love you for 8 years. I've watched him work himself to the bone to provide for you and Laya. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and watch you throw it all away for some smooth-talking charmer. You don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice wavered slightly. Kellen is just a friend. Friends don't touch married women the way he was touching you. Friends don't whisper in married women's ears the way he was whispering in yours. And married women don't light up for their friends the way you lit up for him. The accuracy of Helen's observations hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to back down. You're seeing things that aren't there because you've never liked me. You've been waiting for an excuse to turn Simon against me. Turn Simon against you? Helen laughed bitterly. Honey, you're doing that all by yourself. Simon stepped forward again, his face pale but determined. That's enough from both of you. Mom, I appreciate your concern, but this is between Ivanthy and me. Ivanthy, we're leaving. Fine by me, I said, grabbing my purse. I don't have to stand here and be attacked for having a social life. As we gathered Laya and her things, Helen caught my arm gently. For a moment, her expression softened. Ivanthy, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to save your marriage. You're playing with fire and you're going to get burned. I pulled my arm away. The only fire in my marriage is the one you're trying to start. The drive home was silent, except for Laya's questions about why everyone seemed angry. Simon fielded her concerns with patient explanations about grown-up disagreements, while I stared out the passenger window, replaying the confrontation in my mind. Once Laya was settled with her coloring books, Simon and I faced each other in our kitchen. Your mother was completely out of line, I began. Was she? Simon's voice was tired, because everything she said matched exactly what I observed Friday night. So now you're ganging up on me with your mother? Nobody's ganging up on you, Ivanthy. Multiple people are telling you the same thing because it's true. What's true is that you and your mother are paranoid and controlling. I'm not allowed to have friends. I'm not allowed to enjoy myself. I'm not allowed to have conversations that don't revolve around household management. Simon sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Is that really what you think this is about? I think this is about you feeling threatened because someone else appreciates me. Someone else appreciates you, Simon repeated slowly. Do you hear yourself right now? I hear myself standing up for my right to have friendships outside this house. Friendships? Simon pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. Is that what you call it when you delete text messages from him? My blood went cold. What are you talking about? Our phone plan, Ivanthy. I can see when messages are sent and received, even if they're deleted. You've been texting with Kellen regularly for weeks. So what? Friends text each other. Friends don't usually delete their innocent conversations. I felt trapped, cornered by Simon's logical questions and my own poor decisions. I delete them because I know you'll overreact, just like you're doing now. I'm overreacting by noticing my wife is secretively communicating with another man. You're overreacting by treating normal social interaction like some kind of betrayal. Simon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Normal social interaction doesn't require secrecy, Ivanthy. Normal social interaction doesn't make your spouse feel like a stranger in his own marriage. Maybe if you made me feel valued in this marriage, I wouldn't need to seek validation elsewhere. The words hung in the air between us like a confession. Simon's face went through several emotions: hurt, anger, resignation. There it is, he said quietly. The truth finally comes out. Simon, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant exactly what you said. Simon walked toward the hallway, then turned back. I'm going to start sleeping in my office permanently. I think it's better for everyone. That evening, after Laia was in bed, I called Lauren again. He's being completely unreasonable, I told her, pacing around my empty bedroom. He's treating me like a criminal for having a friend. Men can be so insecure, Lauren agreed. Did you tell him that you're not getting what you need from the marriage? I tried to explain that I feel unappreciated, but he just turned it around on me. Typical. Look, Ivanthy, maybe this is a wake-up call. Maybe Simon isn't the right man for you anymore. People grow apart, it happens. I don't want to get divorced, Lauren. I just want to feel alive again. Then feel alive. You're 32 years old, not 92. If Kellen makes you feel good about yourself, what's wrong with that? Simon thinks there's something inappropriate going on. Is there? I paused, considering the question honestly. I don't know. I mean, nothing physical has happened. But when I'm with Kellen, I feel like the person I used to be before marriage and motherhood took over my life. That's not wrong, Ivanthy. That's human. After we hung up, I lay in my empty bed thinking about Lauren's words. Was it really so wrong to want to feel desired and interesting? Was it my fault that my husband had become complacent while another man still saw my worth? Around 11 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Kellen. Thinking about you tonight. Hope you're well. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, thank you. Looking forward to Coffee Tuesday. This time, I didn't delete the conversation right away. Let Simon see it if he wanted to. I was tired of walking on eggshells in my own life, but as I finally drifted off to sleep, Helen's words echoed in my mind. You're playing with fire, and you're going to get burned. Tuesday afternoon found me sitting across from Kellen at a cozy downtown cafe, nursing a latte and feeling more alive than I had in weeks. He'd chosen a corner table away from the main flow of foot traffic, creating an intimate bubble where we could talk freely. You look stressed, Kellen observed, reaching across the table to touch my hand briefly. Everything okay at home? I sighed, wrapping both hands around my warm mug. Simon's been acting strange since my birthday dinner. He's convinced there's something inappropriate about our friendship. Kellen's eyebrows rose. Inappropriate? We're just talking. That's what I told him, but he's become obsessed with monitoring my behavior. He's even keeping some kind of journal about my activities. A journal? Kellen leaned back in his chair, looking genuinely shocked. That sounds pretty controlling, Ivanthy. It is controlling. I feel like I'm being watched constantly. He questions everything: who I'm texting, where I'm going, why I'm 5 minutes late coming home from work. That's not healthy, Kellen said, his voice gentle but firm. You're a grown woman. You shouldn't have to account for every moment of your day. Thank you, I said, relief flooding through me. It's so nice to talk to someone who understands. Sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy. You're not crazy. You're just married to someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. Kellen's words sent a warm flutter through my chest. This was exactly what I needed. Someone who saw my worth, who validated my feelings, instead of making me question my own sanity. Tell me about your work, I said, eager to change the subject to something lighter. How's the new promotion treating you? For the next hour, we talked about everything and nothing. Kellen had this way of making even mundane topics feel fascinating. He asked thoughtful questions about my job, my dreams, my opinions on books and movies. When was the last time Simon had asked me about my dreams? I should probably head back to work, I said reluctantly, glancing at my watch. Of course. But Ivanthy... Kellen reached for my hand again, his fingers intertwining with mine. I want you to know that you can always talk to me, about anything. You deserve to feel heard and valued. His touch sent electricity up my arm, and I didn't pull away as quickly as I should have. Thank you, Kellen. That means more than you know. Maybe we could do this again next week. I hate thinking of you feeling isolated and unappreciated. I'd like that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. As we stood to leave, Kellen pulled me into a hug that lasted several beats too long. I could feel the solid warmth of his chest against mine, smell his cologne, feel his breath against my hair. Take care of yourself, beautiful, he murmured against my ear. Walking back to my office, I felt guilty and exhilarated in equal measure. Nothing inappropriate had happened. We'd just talked and shared a friendly hug. But the way my heart was racing suggested that my feelings for Kellen were becoming more complicated than simple friendship. Back at work, I found my coworker, Dina, waiting by my desk with eager curiosity written across her face. Well, how was your mysterious coffee date? Dina asked, perching on the edge of my desk. It wasn't a date, I said automatically. Just coffee with a friend. A friend who makes you glow like that. Honey, I've been married for 15 years. I know the difference between friend coffee and something else coffee. I glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. It's complicated, Dina. The best ones always are. Tell Mama Dina everything. Despite my better judgment, I found myself confiding in Dina about my marriage troubles, Simon's controlling behavior, and how appreciated Kellen made me feel. Sounds to me like your husband is threatened because he knows he's been taking you for granted, Dina said when I finished. Men get comfortable and stop putting in effort, then get all shocked and possessive when someone else notices their wife is still a catch. That's exactly how I feel, I said, grateful for another voice of validation. You're young, you're beautiful, you're interesting. If your husband can't see that, maybe it's time he got a wake-up call. I don't want to hurt Simon, but I also don't want to live the rest of my life feeling invisible. Then don't. Life's too short to settle for being unappreciated. That evening, I arrived home to find Simon in the kitchen preparing dinner. Laia was at the table working on homework, and the scene looked deceptively normal. How was your day? Simon asked without looking up from the stove. Fine. Busy. I hung up my coat and kissed Laia's forehead. How's the math homework going, sweetheart? Hard, Laia said with a dramatic sigh. I don't understand fractions. I'll help you after dinner, Simon offered. As we sat down to eat, Simon made polite conversation about work and Laia's school activities, but I could feel his eyes on me, studying my face for signs of whatever he thought he was looking for. Oh, I forgot to mention, I said, trying to sound casual. I had to run a quick errand during lunch today, dentist appointment for a cleaning. Simon nodded, cutting Laia's chicken into smaller pieces. Everything looked good. All clear, clean bill of health. It was a small lie, unnecessary really, but I wasn't ready to deal with Simon's reaction to my coffee date with Kellen. Better to avoid the drama altogether. After dinner, while Simon helped Laia with her homework, I retreated to our bedroom to change clothes. My phone buzzed with a text from Kellen. Thank you for a wonderful afternoon. You're an amazing woman, and I feel lucky to know you. I smiled as I typed back, thank you for listening. It meant the world to me. Sweet dreams, beautiful. Think of me. This time, I did delete the conversation, but only because I could hear Simon's footsteps in the hallway. When he appeared in the bedroom doorway, I was already in my pajamas, scrolling through social media. Laia's all set with her homework, he said. I'm going to work in my office for a while. Simon, wait. I set my phone aside and looked at him directly. Can we talk? Really talk? He hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance between us. What about? About us. About how we got to this place where we're like strangers living in the same house. Simon was quiet for a long moment. I don't feel like a stranger, Ivanthy. I feel like a husband whose wife is pulling away from him. I'm not pulling away. I'm trying to maintain some sense of myself outside of being just a wife and mother. And that requires secrecy, deleted text messages, lies about where you've been. My heart skipped. What lies? I called your dentist's office today to ask about your appointment. They said you haven't been scheduled for a cleaning in over 6 months. The blood drained from my face. Simon had actually called my dentist to check up on me. You called my dentist? What kind of controlling behavior is that? The kind that happens when your wife starts lying about her whereabouts, Simon said quietly. Where were you today, Ivanthy? I had coffee with Kellen, okay. I lied because I knew you'd overreact, just like you're doing now. Simon nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. Coffee with Kellen, the friend you're not having an affair with. I'm not having an affair. We talked for an hour at a public cafe. If that's your definition of an affair, then you need professional help. My definition of an affair is when my wife starts lying to spend time alone with another man. When she deletes his messages and lights up at the mention of his name. When she starts pulling away from her family to create space for someone else. His words hit uncomfortably close to home, but I refused to back down. You're being paranoid and controlling. I won't be isolated just because you're insecure. Simon stood up, his face resigned. I'm not trying to isolate you, Ivanthy. I'm trying to save our marriage, but I can't compete with someone you've already decided is better than me. I never said he was better than you. You didn't have to say it. It's written all over your face every time his name comes up. That night, as Simon settled into his office for another night on the couch, I lay in bed replaying our conversation. Was I really being that obvious about my feelings for Kellen? Was I really pulling away from my family? But then I thought about how alive I'd felt during our coffee date, how seen and appreciated Kellen made me feel. Was it really so wrong to want that in my life? My phone buzzed with another text from Kellen. Can't stop thinking about our conversation today. You deserve so much better than what you're getting at home. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you for saying that. Sometimes I wonder if I'm losing my mind. You're not losing your mind. You're just finally waking up. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself imagining what life might be like with someone who truly appreciated me. Someone who made me feel beautiful and interesting and valued. Someone like Kellen. The following Wednesday morning started like any other. Simon had already left for work when Lyra and I finished breakfast, and I was rushing to get her ready for school when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me to answer. Mrs. Meo, this is Detective Sarah Mills with the County Sheriff's Office. I need to speak with you about some financial irregularities that have come to our attention. My blood went cold. Financial irregularities? I don't understand. We've received documentation suggesting unauthorized use of joint marital funds. I'd like to schedule a time to discuss this with you and your husband. There must be some mistake. I haven't done anything with our finances except normal household expenses. Ma'am, we have receipts for multiple restaurant visits, coffee shops, and retail purchases that don't align with your stated family activities. We'll need to verify these transactions. After hanging up, my hands shook as I tried to process what had just happened. Simon had somehow turned my innocent coffee dates with Kellen into a legal matter. This was beyond controlling. This was warfare. I dropped Leia off at school in a daze, then called in sick to work. I needed to understand what Simon was doing and why. When I arrived home, I found Simon's car in the driveway. He was supposed to be at work, but here he was, sitting at our kitchen table with stacks of papers spread in front of him. What the hell is going on, Simon? I demanded, bursting through the front door. I just got a call from the sheriff's office about financial irregularities. Simon looked up calmly, his face showing no surprise at my early return. Hello, Ivanthy. We need to talk. We need to talk. You called the police on me. I didn't call the police. I consulted with a lawyer about protecting our assets during what appears to be the dissolution of our marriage. Dissolution of our marriage? I sank into a chair across from him, my legs suddenly weak. Simon, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that my wife is having an emotional affair and using our joint funds to finance her relationship with another man. That's insane. I bought coffee, Simon. That's not embezzlement. Simon slid a thick folder across the table to me. Open it. With trembling hands, I opened the folder and felt my world tilt. Inside were printed copies of text messages between Kellen and me going back 6 weeks. Messages I thought I'd deleted. Messages that, when read together, painted a picture of escalating intimacy. How did you get these? Our cell phone carrier keeps records of all text communications for billing purposes. When I explained to them that I suspected my wife was having an affair, they provided me with the complete communication history. I flipped through page after page of my private conversations with Kellen. Taken out of context, they looked damning. Compliments about my appearance, complaints about my marriage, plans to meet secretly. This is a violation of my privacy. This is evidence of adultery, Simon said quietly. Emotional adultery, but adultery nonetheless. We never had sex, Simon. We never even kissed. Adultery isn't just physical, Ivanthy. It's about giving your emotional energy, your intimacy, your affection to someone outside your marriage. It's about lying to your spouse and using marital resources to pursue another relationship. I stared at the evidence in front of me, seeing my innocent friendship with Kellen transformed into something sordid and calculating. You're taking everything out of context. Am I? Simon pulled out another document. This is a timeline I've created of your behavior over the past 2 months. Late nights at work that don't match your actual work schedule. Mysterious errands that turn out to be lies. Money spent at restaurants and cafes during times when you claim to be elsewhere. You've been spying on me. I've been documenting the breakdown of my marriage. My lawyer advised me to keep detailed records in case we end up in divorce court. Divorce court? The words hit me like a physical blow. Simon, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I've filed preliminary paperwork to protect our assets and establish a custody schedule for Laya. Custody schedule? You can't take my daughter away from me. I can and I will if it's in her best interest. A mother who lies, manipulates, and pursues relationships outside her marriage isn't providing a stable environment for a 7-year-old. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a reality that had shifted too quickly for me to process. Simon, please, can't we work this out? Can't we go to counseling or something? I suggested counseling 6 months ago when I first noticed you pulling away. You said we didn't need it, that I was being dramatic. I was wrong. I'll go to counseling now. I'll do whatever you want. Simon's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. It's too late for that, Ivanthy. You've made your choice. What choice? I chose to have coffee with a friend. You chose to lie to me repeatedly. You chose to delete communications with another man. You chose to use our money to finance a relationship you were hiding from me. You chose to humiliate me in public and gaslight me when I tried to address it. Each accusation felt like a slap. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and now we have to deal with the consequences. The front door opened, and I heard footsteps in the hallway. A moment later, a woman in a business suit appeared in our kitchen, carrying a briefcase and an official-looking envelope. Mrs. Meo, I'm Janet Torres, process server. I have documents for you. With shaking hands, I accepted the envelope and tore it open. Inside were divorce papers, a restraining order requiring me to stay away from Kellen, and a temporary custody order giving Simon primary custody of Laya. This can't be legal, I whispered. It's completely legal, Simon said. I have evidence of adultery, financial impropriety, and emotional instability. The court has granted temporary measures to protect Laya's well-being. Emotional instability? I'm not emotionally unstable. You've been lying to your family for weeks, carrying on a secret relationship, and gaslighting your husband when confronted with evidence. The court considers that emotionally unstable behavior. The process server cleared her throat. Ma'am, I also need to inform you that you have 72 hours to vacate the marital residence. Alternative housing arrangements have been made. Vacate? This is my home. This is the home I've been paying for while you used our joint funds to date another man, Simon said. The court has awarded me temporary possession. I looked around our kitchen, the place where I'd made countless meals, helped Laya with homework, shared morning coffee with Simon during happier times. Now it was being taken away from me like everything else. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my concern anymore, Simon said, but I caught a flicker of pain in his eyes. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our family. I didn't destroy our family. I had coffee with someone who made me feel appreciated. You destroyed our family the moment you chose to lie to me. Everything that's happening now is just the natural consequence of that choice. After the process server left, I sat in stunned silence, staring at the legal documents that were dismantling my life. Simon began gathering his papers, preparing to leave. Simon, please. Think about Laya. Think about what this will do to her. He paused in the doorway, his back to me. I am thinking about Laya. I'm thinking about raising her to believe she deserves honesty and respect in her relationships. I'm thinking about showing her that actions have consequences and that marriage means something. You're destroying her family. No, Ivanthy, you did that. I'm just making sure she doesn't grow up thinking this is normal. That afternoon, I sat alone in our empty house, surrounded by legal papers and the wreckage of my life. I called Lauren, sobbing into the phone as I tried to explain what had happened. He can't do this, Lauren said angrily. You had coffee with someone. That's not grounds for divorce. Apparently, it is when you lie about it and use joint funds. Get your own lawyer, Ivanthy. Fight this. Don't let him railroad you. But as I looked at the evidence Simon had compiled, months of documented lies, deleted messages, and secret meetings, I realized how thoroughly I'd been outmaneuvered. Every choice I'd thought was innocent had been building toward this moment. My phone buzzed with a text from Kellen. Haven't heard from you today. Everything okay? For the first time, I didn't respond to his message. Instead, I deleted it and blocked his number. Whatever I'd thought I was building with Kellen, it had cost me everything that actually mattered. As evening fell and the reality of my situation began to sink in, I found myself wondering how I'd gotten here. When had innocent friendship crossed the line into betrayal? When had my desire to feel appreciated become more important than my family's stability? But even as I asked myself these questions, a part of me still insisted that Simon was overreacting, that I was the victim of his controlling behavior and paranoid jealousy. It would take everything that happened next to finally show me the truth about what I'd really done. 3 weeks later, I sat in the waiting area of Thornton and Associates, clutching a folder of documents that my hastily hired lawyer assured me would help my case. The law office smelled like leather and disappointment, and every surface seemed designed to intimidate people like me. People who'd found themselves on the wrong side of a legal battle they never saw coming. Mrs. Meo, a young paralegal, appeared at my side. Attorney Davidson is ready for you. I followed her down a hallway lined with imposing portraits of stern-faced lawyers, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Through an open conference room door, I caught a glimpse of Simon sitting calmly beside his attorney, a stack of evidence boxes on the table in front of them. My lawyer, Robert Davidson, was a rumpled man in his 50s who'd been recommended by Lauren's divorce attorney. He'd been honest about my chances from our first consultation. Not good. The evidence against you is substantial, he'd told me during our initial meeting. Your husband has documented everything meticulously. Our best strategy is to argue that emotional infidelity isn't grounds for the kind of punitive measures he's seeking. Now, as we entered the conference room where mediation would take place, I felt the full weight of my situation. Simon's lawyer, Patricia Hawkins, was a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. The mediator, Judge Morrison, looked like he'd been handling messy divorces since before I was born. "Good morning," Judge Morrison said as we took our seats. "We're here to discuss the dissolution of the marriage between Simon and Ivanthy Meo, with particular focus on custody arrangements and asset division. Mrs. Hawkins, please present your client's position." Patricia Hawkins opened the first evidence box with practiced efficiency. "Your Honor, we have extensive documentation of Mrs. Meo's adultery, financial impropriety, and systematic deception of her family." She began laying out printed text messages, bank statements, and photographs on the conference table. I watched in horror as my private life was dissected and displayed, like evidence at a crime scene. "These text messages show a pattern of emotional infidelity spanning 6 weeks," Hawkins continued. "Mrs. Meo used joint marital funds to finance secret meetings with Mr. Kellen Drake, lied repeatedly about her whereabouts, and engaged in intimate communication while gaslighting her husband about the nature of the relationship." Judge Morrison examined the text messages, his expression growing increasingly stern as he read. "These are quite explicit in terms of emotional intimacy." "That's not fair," I interjected, earning a sharp look from my lawyer. "Those messages are being taken out of context." "Mrs. Meo," Judge Morrison said patiently, "you'll have your opportunity to respond. Please allow Mrs. Hawkins to finish." Hawkins pulled out another set of documents. "We also have evidence that Mrs. Meo's behavior has negatively impacted the couple's 7-year-old daughter. The child has exhibited signs of anxiety and confusion due to the marital discord." She placed a folder in front of the judge containing what appeared to be school counselor reports and pediatric records. "Laya Meo has been acting out at school, asking teachers if her parents are getting divorced, and experiencing sleep disturbances at home. My heart clenched as I realized that my actions had affected Laya in ways I hadn't even noticed. I'd been so focused on my own feelings that I'd missed the signs of my daughter's distress. Furthermore," Hawkins continued, "we have affidavit testimony from family members who witnessed Mrs. Meo's inappropriate behavior at public gatherings." She handed the judge a statement that I recognized as Helen's handwriting. My mother-in-law had documented everything she'd observed at my birthday dinner, providing a detailed account of my interactions with Kellen. Finally, we have financial records showing that Mrs. Meo spent over $800 of joint marital funds on meals, coffee dates, and gifts related to her relationship with Mr. Drake. $800. When laid out like that, it sounded like a fortune. But it had just been coffee here, lunch there, a small gift for Kellen's promotion. I hadn't thought of it as stealing from my family. "Mr. Davidson," Judge Morrison said, turning to my lawyer, "your client's response." Davidson cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, while Mrs. Meo acknowledges that she developed a friendship with Mr. Drake, there was no physical adultery. The relationship never progressed beyond conversation and emotional support." "Emotional support that required secrecy and deception?" the judge asked. "My client felt isolated in her marriage and sought friendship outside the home. This is not uncommon and shouldn't be grounds for punitive custody arrangements." Judge Morrison looked at me directly. "Mrs. Meo, do you wish to make a statement?" I stood up on shaking legs, my prepared speech evaporating under the weight of all the evidence spread across the table. "Your Honor, I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just lonely and feeling unappreciated in my marriage. Kellen made me feel valued and interesting. I know I made mistakes, but I never had a physical affair." "But you did lie to your husband repeatedly?" "Yes, but only because I knew he would overreact." You used joint funds to finance secret meetings. It was just coffee and lunch. I didn't think of it as taking money from my family. You deleted communications to hide them from your spouse? I hesitated, seeing the trap but unable to avoid it. Yes, but there was nothing inappropriate in those messages. Judge Morrison gestured to the printed texts on the table. Mrs. Meo, I've read these messages. They contain explicit emotional intimacy, complaints about your marriage, and romantic undertones. How do you characterize that as nothing inappropriate? I felt my defense crumbling as I looked at the evidence of my own words. Seen through the judge's eyes, through Simon's eyes, through anyone's objective perspective, my behavior looked exactly like what it was, an emotional affair that I'd been too self-deceived to acknowledge. I was confused about my feelings, I admitted quietly. Confused enough to prioritize those feelings over your marriage and your daughter's well-being. The question hit like a physical blow. I never wanted to hurt Laya. But you did hurt her, didn't you? Your actions created instability in her home environment. Tears began streaming down my face as the full reality of what I'd done finally penetrated my wall of denial. Yes, I hurt her. I hurt everyone. Judge Morrison made notes on his legal pad while I struggled to compose myself. When he looked up, his expression was grave but not unkind. Mrs. Meo, I'm going to be frank with you. The evidence presented here shows a pattern of deceptive behavior that undermines the trust necessary for healthy co-parenting. While I don't believe you're an unfit mother, I do believe that your recent choices demonstrate poor judgment that could affect your daughter's stability. He turned to a fresh page in his notes. Therefore, I'm awarding primary custody to Mr. Meo, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Meo, until she completes counseling and demonstrates consistent, responsible behavior. Supervised visitation, I gasped. You're treating me like a criminal. I'm treating you like a parent who needs to rebuild trust with her family. The supervision requirement will be reviewed in 6 months based on your progress in counseling and your compliance with the custody order. The judge continued outlining the terms of our divorce. Simon would keep the house, the majority of our assets, and primary custody of Laya. I would have limited visitation rights and would be required to attend individual therapy as well as co-parenting classes. Additionally, Judge Morrison said, Mrs. Meo is prohibited from introducing any romantic partners to the minor child for a period of 1 year, and any future romantic relationships must be disclosed to Mr. Meo as part of the custody agreement. As the legal proceedings concluded and papers were signed, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process how completely my life had been dismantled. Simon had been methodical and thorough, documenting every lie, every deception, every poor choice I'd made. When the session ended, Simon approached me in the hallway outside the conference room. For a moment, he looked like the man I'd married, tired, sad, but not cruel. Ivanthy, I want you to know that I don't hate you, he said quietly. I just can't trust you anymore, and Leia needs stability. I know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I know I messed up everything. The counseling requirement isn't meant to punish you. It's meant to help you understand why you made the choices you made, so you can be a better mother to Laya. I nodded, tears making it difficult to speak. Can I see her before you take her home? Simon's expression softened slightly. She's at my parents' house, maybe next weekend, during your scheduled visit. As Simon walked away with his lawyer, I remained in the hallway, surrounded by the wreckage of my own making. My marriage was over. My daughter would grow up in a broken home because of my choices. My family was destroyed because I'd been too selfish and self-deceived to see what I was doing. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I stopped trying to justify my actions or blame Simon for overreacting. The evidence was overwhelming, the consequences were deserved, and the responsibility was entirely mine. I had chosen momentary validation over lasting love. I had chosen the excitement of a new connection over the stability of my family. I had chosen lies and deception over honesty and communication. And now I would spend the rest of my life living with those choices. 6 months later, I sat in my small studio apartment, reading a letter from Laya that Simon had helped her write. She was doing well in school, had made new friends, and was excited about her upcoming dance recital. The letter was sweet and loving, but it felt like communication from a distant relative rather than from my own daughter. My supervised visits had gone well, and my counselor was optimistic about recommending expanded custody rights. But the damage was done. Laya's primary home was with Simon. Her stability came from his consistency, and her trust had been rebuilt through his patient presence. I had learned too late that marriage isn't about feeling constantly excited and appreciated. It's about choosing commitment over convenience, honesty over self-interest, and family stability over personal gratification. Simon had remarried, a kind woman named Rebecca, who treated Laya with genuine affection. They'd invited me to Laya's birthday party, a gesture of grace that I both appreciated and found painful. As I prepared for another therapy session, I reflected on the question that had started this whole disaster. Was I really the villain, or just misunderstood? The answer was clear now. I wasn't misunderstood. I was a woman who had made selfish choices and then refused to take responsibility for them until the consequences forced me to face reality. Simon hadn't overreacted. He had protected his daughter and himself from someone who had proven she couldn't be trusted with their hearts. And Kellen, he had disappeared from my life the moment things got complicated, proving that his interest in me had been superficial and opportunistic. I was the villain in this story, but perhaps with enough work and genuine change, I could still be a mother worth having in Laya's life. The phone rang. Simon, calling to coordinate next weekend's visit. "Hello, Ivanthy. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well, thank you. How's Laya?" "She's good. She's been asking if she can show you her new art project during your visit." "I'd love to see it." "Good. I'll pick you up at 10 on Saturday." After we hung up, I sat quietly in my small apartment, grateful for Simon's continued grace and determined to earn back whatever trust might still be possible. It had taken losing everything to finally understand what I'd really had.